So let's actually take a look at how we would use the ELA framework to think about what we want our students to get out of a text. I'm going to read to you the last couple paragraphs of The Great Gatsby, which is one of my favorite novels of all time. And just like as an English teacher, right, you need to be reading texts that you love with your students because you're not going to make meaning from them with your kids if they're not meaningful to you as well. So here we go. Gatsby's house was still empty when I left. The grass on his lawn has grown as long as mine. One of the taxi drivers in the village never took a fare past the entrance gate without stopping for a minute and pointing inside. Perhaps it was he who drove Daisy and Gatsby over to East Egg the night of the accident, and perhaps he had made a story about it all his own. I didn't want to hear it, and I avoided him when I got off the train. I spent my Saturday nights in New York because those gleaming, dazzling parties of his were with me so vividly that I could still hear the music and the laughter, faint and incessant, from his garden and the cars going up and down his drive. One night, I did hear a material car there and saw its lights stop at his front steps, but I didn't investigate. Probably it was some final guest who had been away at the ends of the earth and didn't know that the party was over. On the last night, with my trunk packed and my car sold to the grocer, I went over and looked at that huge, incoherent failure of a house once more. On the white steps, an obscene word, scrawled by some boy with a piece of brick, stood out clearly in the moonlight, and I erased it, drawing my shoe raspingly along the sand. Then I wandered down to the beach and sprawled out. Most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy, moving glow of a ferry boat across the Sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away until gradually I became aware of this old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes. A fresh green breast of this new world. Its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent. Compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face, for the last time in history, with something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. And as I sat there brooding on the old, unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, in the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch our arms out further, and then, one fine morning, and so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. So as we use the ELA framework to actually break down what I just read, thinking about what we would want our students to be noting and considering, first we're going to ask, what is the author trying to convey here? So a huge theme in The Great Gatsby is the emptiness of the American dream, and that's something that's very much hit home in this final passage. Another thing that I think the author is really trying to convey in this story with a protagonist like Gatsby is the tension between idealism and realism, especially concerning love, I think. And then also in this bit, Nick's, the narrator's, final perceptions of Gatsby, which are perhaps both pitying and admiring. So I think all of these are things that F. Scott Fitzgerald is trying to get across to his reader. And how does he create this meaning? As a teacher, I need to be able to break this down because if I'm not really considering how the author is making meaning, then my lessons are not going to be authentically structured in a way that helps my students to get there too. So first, I notice the symbolism of all the light imagery. This is a recurring motif throughout The Great Gatsby, but it certainly is hit home in this final passage. Next, we know that Fitzgerald is using a narrator who may or may not be reliable, and that this is going to shift how we view the plot and the theme of the book. Then we have the personification of the land in these final paragraphs. We have the run-on sentence at the very end. And then we have this boat metaphor in the final sentence. So all of these things are ways in which we are layering meaning in this story to go beyond plot, but really into metaphorical thinking as well. So finally, then we have to say, what must a reader do to get at this meaning, right? What do my students need to be thinking about? And I've pulled out just a few here because they're honestly, and I love this book so much because there are so many ways you could go with this, right? But one is we can analyze the motif of the light in this passage and all throughout. And in order to do this, our students, to do that analyzation, they need to be making inferences, right? They need to be thinking beyond the literal and getting into, like, what is this figurative language saying? They need to be able to really break that down. Then another piece that I might pull out, and again, there are other ways I could go, but is to evaluate Nick as a narrator based on his thoughts, and then also based on the comments of other characters, especially that final scene with Jordan where she talks about good driving. Oh my gosh, I love that paragraph so much. And to get here, to do that level of evaluation, our students need to be able to, again, infer. They need to be able to read beyond exactly what is said. They need to make judgments that are based on textual evidence. And then they have to really analyze the different characters and draw conclusions. And so when I think about what I would need to be teaching earlier in a unit for my students to be able to get to these final goals, I need to make sure that I'm including all these pieces. And so the language arts framework essentially just provides a really organic and holistic way for us to break down what do we need to do to really comprehend and love a text.